2?
Sure.
I
I'm just looking at these. I'm like, I don't even know what.
Okay, I think 1 and 2, the least common multiple, you're making sure that each of them can go into whatever you end up with. So for example, let's look at number 1. We have 18 a to the third b c squared, and then 24 b squared c squared. Now remember, I can't see your faces, so if you're confused, do question marks or something, because this is really hard for me not being able to read your faces. So we need something that 18 and 24 go into. And so you just kind of start messing around with numbers till you can see, or you can do this. You can go, well, 18, I can prime factor 18. 2 times 3 times 3. And 24 is 2 times 2 times 3. Okay, so when you prime factor them, you end up needing the same, to find a multiple, you need the same numbers. So we have 1, 2 here and 1, 2 here. But then we have a second 2. And so we're going to have to put another 2 in here. If they're in common, you only have to write it once. So there's a 3 in each of them, so I write that. But then there's an extra 3 in the first one, so I write that. Okay? And then up here, when we look at each letter, there's a to the third. So the most a's we have are to the third. So this would be a to the third. And then the most b's we have is b squared. So that we can put b squared. And the most c's we have is c squared. And so that's how we get 72 a to the third b squared c squared. So that's a least common multiple. Both 24, I'm looking at it backwards. 24 b squared c squared goes into 72 a to the third b squared c squared. And 18 a to the third b c squared goes into that number. So the answer here is going to be this, because this is the smallest number that they all go into, that they both go into. Okay?
So if you, my brother's yelling up there.
Oh, that's okay.
But, so if you don't have a match, you just write it down once, and if you have a match, you also write it down once.
Yeah, if there's a match, you don't have to write it twice. You just write it once, okay, because it's already in both of them. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, I think this is hard to explain. So let's look at why we're doing this, because I think the why helps in this case, which I don't usually think, because I don't think that way. But let's talk about, and I put this in my hints, but what this is all about is least common denominator. That's what we're going to be doing. We're looking for the least common denominator. So if you remember back in the day when we did fractions, let's say we had 2/3, I'll make it easy, plus 4/7. We had to figure out a number that 3 and 7 both go into. And we had to make that our denominator. So in this case, I said, well, 21 is going to be what they both go into. Well, that's fine, but in order to get 21, we need a 7 here. So if I multiply by 7 in the denominator, I have to multiply by the numerator. So that's why we end up with 14. And in this case, in the second fraction, we already have a 7, but we need a 3 to make 21. And so we multiply the bottom and the top. And then remember, when we add fractions, you keep the denominators the same, and you add the numerators. So that's the big idea that we're going to build off of, is common denominators. Any questions so far? I'm trying to keep an eye on the chat, or you can unmute yourself and just yell out, because we do that in class anyway. It's not like we raise our hands. All right, so are we okay with remembering how to get a common denominator?
Yeah.
So that's what we're doing here. We're just doing it in a very complicated way. Okay?
Okay.
All right, so which one? Do you want to see number 3, or did you already do that one?
I haven't done 3.
Okay, if you haven't done any, that's fine. I'll just jump around and pick some.
I haven't done any.
Okay, that's fine. Yeah, I'm fine with that. So number 3 looks like this. 3 over x plus 5 over y. Okay, we need a common denominator here. Well, we have an x on one and a y in the other. So the only thing they can both go into is x and y. So we need xy to be our common denominator. Okay? Now, in order to do that now, we can't just decide, oh, we're multiplying x and y. We actually have to stay balanced here. So the x here, it doesn't have a y next to it, so we have to put a y next to it. Whatever we do to the denominator, we have to do the numerator. Okay? In the second fraction, there's a y, but there's no x. So we have to bring an x into it. Okay? And whatever we do to the bottom, we have to do to the top. So now our bottom is xy. We made them both xy. And our top now is 3y plus 5x. Or 5x plus 3y. And so this is the final answer. Again, remember, you can't cancel out unless the whole chunk is equal to the whole chunk. Does that make some sense?
Yeah.
Okay. Anybody else want to say anything? No? Okay. So let's do number 4, because number 4 is a nice example of, okay, what's there and what's not there and what do we need to bring in? Okay. So number 4 starts with 12 over 5y squared minus 2 over 10yz. Okay, well, let's start with a number. What number does both 5 and 10 go into? 10. So we're going to have that. Now let's look at our letters. We have a y in each one, but we have an extra y in the first one. So that's going to be y squared. And then we have a z. So we have to put a z there. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, so then now we got to go back and see what's missing in each denominator. So in this denominator, we're missing a 2, because we need a 2 times 5. And we also need a z to make 10y squared z. And so we multiply the top times 2z also. Okay? In the second one, in the second fraction, we already have a 10, so we don't need that. We have 1y, so we need a second y there. And so I'm going to multiply by y. And we already have a z there. And again, whatever I multiply the bottom by, multiply the top by. So now on the top, we have 24z, because I multiplied this together, minus 2y. And that's going to be our final answer. Okay?
And you can't simplify.
No, because of that subtraction in between the two, that's like one. If you see subtraction or plus, that's one giant number, so you can't split it apart.
Okay.
Okay, if there was a chunk on the bottom that was 24z minus 2y, those you could cancel out, but it would have to be exactly the same.
Okay.
Okay? All right, so then let's go to one that's a little more complicated. Let's go to number 8. So number 8 looks like this. 4z over z minus 4 plus z plus 1 over z plus 4. And this is what I'm talking about, chunks. So we can't just say, oh, well, that has a z and that has a z, so we need to subtract 4 and add a 1. We can't do that. We need to think of this as one big chunk. Okay? So in this case, our common denominator is chunk 1, which is z minus 4, minus times the second chunk, which is z plus 1. Okay? So because they're chunks, we got to do them as in parentheses. So then we go back to our first fraction. What are we missing from that? We're missing z plus 1. And so in parentheses, we put z plus 1 on the top, because that's one big number together. In the second fraction, we're missing z minus 4. And so we have to multiply that on the top.
Z minus 4 to z plus 4?
Z minus 4, because that's what's in the other fraction.
Oh.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. Now I'm going to need more room, so I'm going to go below it, because now we're going to have to do some foiling and some distributing. So in the top, we have 4z times the quantity z plus 1 plus z minus 4 times z plus 4. And in the bottom, we just have our common denominator, z minus 4, z plus 1. Okay, so all I did was write it out now. Now I'm going to distribute the 4z. So that gives me 4z squared plus 4z from the first fraction. And then this one, when you FOIL it, I'll do the whole thing, but you get z squared minus 4z plus 4z minus 16. And so this cancels, the middle terms cancel out. And you end up with a minus 16 here. Oops, sorry. Z squared minus 16. All over the two chunks. And now your last step is to simplify the numerator if it can be simplified. Okay, so we would get 5z squared plus 4z minus 16 over z minus 4, z plus 1.
Could you move it over a little bit?
Okay, this way?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Uh-huh. Is that light glaring in your...
A little bit.
Let me see if I turn off that light. Can you still see it okay? Oh yeah. That's better without the glare. Okay. So in later problems, we would have to make sure the top didn't factor to make sure nothing could cancel out, but we're not to that point yet. So this will be our final answer for now. Well, in this case, it is the final answer. It doesn't factor. Does that make sense? No, get out, dog. My cat didn't make it back to the bedroom today, so she's in here with me. She hates the dog, so if the dog comes in, she starts freaking out.
Yeah, so I think someone just rang our doorbell and our dogs are freaking out.
She can't get comfortable because she's so worried the dog's going to come in. She's going to be exhausted. She hasn't had her 20-minute nap that she has every hour. All right, so are there any others? I mean, I could do, let me pick one more. Are you guys okay with me doing one more?
Yeah.
Or do you want me to do more than one? I'm thinking if I do one more and then you try it and then you can come back and I can do more later if you want. I'm more than happy to do all of them. I don't care. All right, I'll do number 12 because I think that's the most complicated. All right, number 12 is 3 over y squared plus y minus 12 minus 2 over y squared plus 6y plus 8. Okay, now you should automatically notice that these are probably going to be factorable, and that's the whole reason we put them here. So if they're factorable, you go and do magic X if you have to and do the box method, or some of you may be to the point that you can just do it quickly. It's plus 4 minus 3. And on this one, it's going to be y plus 4 and then y plus 2. You all okay where I got those?
Yeah.
So we already have a y plus 4 in the bottom of both of them. So we only have to write y plus 4 once, because that's already common to both of them. But the two chunks that are not common are y minus 3 and y plus 2. So they have to become part of your common denominator. And then you have to go back and see what's missing. So in the first fraction, we already have a y plus 4, we have a y minus 3, but we don't have a y plus 2. And so that's what has to be multiplied top and bottom by to make a common denominator. And then in the second fraction, we already have a y plus 4 and a y plus 2, but we don't have a y minus 3. So that's what has to become your common denominator. Or that's what you have to add to make your common denominator. Okay? And so then on the top, from the first one, we can distribute that fraction, that 3, and we get 3y plus 6. Now here's the important part. When you have a minus, remember it's minus the whole thing. So I'm going to put that in parentheses for now, so I remember to distribute that minus. And I'm talking about this minus right here. So I'm putting it there. Okay? And the reason I'm putting in parentheses is because it's minusing the entire next fraction, so we need to minus the entire numerator. Okay? So this would be 2y minus 6.
Minus 6?
Yes, because here we go. 2 times y is 2y.
Oh.
Got it?
Yeah.
Okay. It could have easily been my mistake. Now what I'm going to do, now you could do this in 1 step or 2 steps. I'm going to do 2 steps just so I can show you what I'm thinking. I'm going to distribute that negative that was in front. So really what I have in my numerator now is 3y plus 6 minus 2y plus 6. And that's all over all those chunks that we did, our common denominator. Does that make sense what I just did?
Yeah.
I distributed that negative 1. And now it's a matter of simplifying the numerator. Oh, I bored Colin enough that he left. So this will be y plus 12. This is what happens in my classroom anyway. People get up and leave and...
And then the denominator stays the same?
Yep, the denominator is going to... And so that's going to happen in every problem on this one. On this homework, the denominator is just going to stay that mess for now. Obviously, we're going to... Huh?
I said I don't want it to stay that mess.
I'm with you. It's not... That doesn't feel like we're done. And we are leading into something, so we'll get there. But you have to figure out how to do common denominators first before we get to the next part.
And then on the numerator, you just combined what could
Yes.
go together.
So 3y and negative 2y becomes y. And then plus 6 is where we get our 12.
Okay.
Okay? Does that help? Do you think you'll be able to do the rest?
Hopefully.
All right, we'll try them and then